I will introduce myself shortly, but today we're going to talk about UX speed. And it's an introduction in both ways, in the sense that it will start with some basics, but it will also introduction in the sense that we've always talked about web performance. You will notice a few strikeout text on the screen here and there, and some of them are just for fun, but I mean it. Like, I want to talk about speed of user experience tonight. A couple words about myself. I'm a web performance engineer at Cloudflare. I've been doing it for a while. Sometimes I talk on the technical topics, sometimes I talk on more philosophical topics about web performance, but I think it's a challenging field in many ways, and that's worth presenting about, so hence the talk. I organized this group, which I try to call UX Speed Meetup now. I don't think I will ever remove the word web performance, but that's life. I also am a member of Google's program called Google Developer Experts, where we talk about Google technology, and in my particular case, I talk about Core Web Vitals, browser technology, basically web performance section of their GDE program, basically. And it's very interesting because they give me access to some information early on, right? Like they ask for opinions about things. So I have a chance of watching some of this technology developing, which is very curious. And also speak at events at Google and stuff like that. I'm also a member of RAM community group, and RAM stands for Real User Measurement. We'll talk about it later, but it's a community group at W3C, which everyone can join. And if you're interested, you can join basically a group that helps the standardization body, which is Web Performance Group, define the standards, right? And you can watch this develop basically and join the players in the space, in this case, Real User Monitoring, discussing these challenges. It is not all web performance in that group. It's primarily about measurement and specifically real user measurement, but it's the same people, frankly. So you will benefit from it if you care about metrics a little bit. Okay, so enough about myself. Let's start, and I will open this website real quick. Do I have the Wi-Fi going? Yeah, I think I have the Wi-Fi. You would think it's this company, it will work, right? Oh, come on. Clearly. Oh, okay, it's loading. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's very useful. Yeah, okay. Clearly, it's loading very slowly. Right? Okay, that was a ruse, obviously. I wanted you to feel what it feels, and awkwardness, maybe different kind of awkwardness when you are sitting there than if you are presenting. But slow websites are not very good feeling, right? They don't give you good feeling. And obviously in the mobile, you can imagine, on the mobile, I don't even need to tell you. Like the moment I show you the mobile phone with a spinner, you know that it's definitely slower, right? Because it's obvious, right? Something is obviously slower on mobile devices. Whatever it's network, whatever it's hardware, whatever, right? We're not going to talk about details of that. There are quite a few good talks about the topic, but and the fact that next billion devices is actually not a more powerful devices, but actually less powerful devices, right? Cheaper devices, because next billion users. I think we already are at that billion when we were talking about next billion. I think we are on the next billion now, but who knows what's going to be next, right? I feel that the fact that slowness is very deep in our heart, we don't like it quite a bit, right? But we cannot necessarily talk about it very well, right? We don't have a language. So I that's why I decided to talk about this aspect of it, not the technical aspect of it, right? But the feeling of slowness. And I'm not going to only talk about touchy-feely like stuff, but that's kind of the topic. And Caroline Loewick, who, if you attended her talk here, is it half a year ago? I don't remember anymore. She agrees. She calls it site speed user experience, and she says slowness sucks, right? A great abbreviation. I mean, I went a little different way, but we both talk about the user experience and speed as the main topic of this work that we do. By the way, Caroline is co-chair of the Run community group I just mentioned, right? Like she is the CEO of the real user monitoring provider called Run Vision, right? But convincing people to care is part of her job as much as it is part of mine, and we try to figure out how to make people feel this problem, right? So that's why we want to rename the industry, maybe, into speed of user experience, right? Or UX speed, as I call it, right? Again, renaming the industry is not easy, but hopefully I will have more voices saying that UX speed with me, and we'll eventually do that together, right? So let's talk why speed matters. I know many of you probably have seen this, and by the way, this is data from WPO Stats resource that I mentioned in the introduction. But as a business person, you need to care about it because there is money in it, right? Like you will make more money if your site is fast. This is like appealing to the very nature of American heart, the capitalism, right? Business, money, make more money, you will be more successful financially, which probably is good for you, maybe, and stuff like that. But there are many companies that collected the data that proves that. They show their own research, they show the results of their own digital transformation that improved performance, right? Like 3% conversion increase, come on, this is like creating a new line of product, figuring it out and becoming successful at selling it. It's an enormous amount of business you can get, right? Or 300 milliseconds latency reduction, 11.5 million a year. I mean, these numbers speak volumes, right? Again, many of these lines are big companies, right? Like obviously it's cumulative impact, but still, obviously, small companies just have harder time creating this documentation, creating this kind of proof for others. They probably cannot invest as much into documenting it as much. But it doesn't mean that you will not benefit from it, right? So one thing I always want to mention is that 2009 research from Google where degradation caused people not to show up after the experiment was lifted, right? So it's not just during the slowness that they stop liking you. They remember that you suck, right? And they don't come as often, right? So it's not only the technical part, right? Like it's always about perception, always about brand perception. Again, I mentioned Tammy Everett's before with Time is Money book. All of you should read it. Tammy, self-proclaimed non-technical person, she talks about web performance. She did UX research for her whole career. She talks about business impact and stuff like that. She did a lot, like definitely read the book. I don't want to spoil it. She talks about the non-obvious mathematical direct impact that we cannot even measure very well, right? That is still impacting you. You just don't know about it, right? So let's step back a little bit and talk about why you should measure speed, right? Before I go into this list, I want to say that without measuring, you don't know what's going on. Your assumptions are your assumptions. Your phone is your phone and not everybody else's phone, right? So you should measure. There's no way of going about it without measuring. I actually don't like measurement. I'm not a statistician. I don't like collecting a lot of numbers and making reason about them, but I have to do it because I want to progress and prove the data with data that things work right? I want to prove business that things work, right? And as this list shows, like operations people, like literally they monitor for degradations and speed. They need to like catch it on time, right? Developers need to analyze the causes for why their application is slow. Like that's what we do often at the Meet for Speed sessions, right? We literally look at the code. At some company I worked for, it was called page construction, right? It's a very good term, good little term that says like, hey, how did I construct my page? Why did I do it this way? How does that impact user experience on that page? Excuse me. The funny part is that we all think we know how to improve things, but oftentimes we find ourselves not improving and actually doing completely opposite. So that's why you also need to measure after you've made a change and compare what we usually call baseline to what you did, right? Ideally in a real user monitoring scenario, right? But even synthetically, like your assumption about how things work might be completely wrong. I made a few projects where like I purposefully did that, and almost every other assumption that I'd made was wrong. If you ever want to make a huge website with millions of icons creating a map, if you know what's slow in that website, you let me know, because I'll tell you that you're probably wrong. You know? It's a funny website that I did. But what I mean is that it happens to me to this day, right? Like I might have one assumption about how particular technology works and what it improves, and I find that it's not like that when I measure it, right? Either the impact is much smaller than I thought, or much bigger than I thought, or amount of users impacted is smaller or bigger, right? Again, I don't want to give examples because we can talk about it separately, right? And then we talked about like the business cases, right? Business doesn't want you to work on things that don't bring money, and prioritizing things that bring money is an important part of the business. So prioritizing business improvements requires you to show the impact of your work. And if no one can see which pixels have changed, right, like which buttons got created or which emails got sent or whatever as a part of your work, they're like, this is not work. Like, what did you do? Like, made a computer work better? Didn't you? Were you not supposed to do that to begin with? Right? Like, that was your job. We hired you to do good software, right? And suddenly it's slow. Come on, right? But you need to prioritize your work, right? And to do that, you need to talk to your business people to help them prioritize. And some of this work requires either vendor purchases, right? Like significant budgets for to pay the vendor, like CDN, for example, right, or a real user monitoring provider, or image service, right? Like some businesses require quite a bit of that, or whatever that is, right? Or frankly, to open a data center in another country if your users are there, right, or something like that, right? And those are not cheap things. It's not just your developer time that you need to spend, but actually much bigger investment. And some even developer projects are quite time consuming, right? Because they usually impact the whole website. Like when it's not about one page, right? Anyway, enough said about that. So business impact is also important, and you need to measure to do that. Let's quickly talk about two core methods of measurement that we use. First one is called synthetic testing and analysis. Notice I'm not using the word monitoring, even though many people do like synthetic monitoring. But I do not like synthetic monitoring because it just says, well, we keep doing it, right? But it's not producing a lot of statistical data necessarily. So I like to concentrate on testing and analysis, where you analyze the problem. As I said, page construction. You can see a waterfall chart displayed here. It's a very old slide. With an old version of the chart, but it's still as dramatic. All of these are requests on a page. When people come and they never learned about how pages look like, they know like, oh my God, so many. And this is actually nothing comparing to what it is today. Right? And what synthetic also does for you is basically, well, let me backtrack. Synthetic is basically making computer pretend to be a user, right? You open a browser on that computer using usually a program. Usually it's not manually done. Although in Chrome Developer Tools, you can do it like literally in your browser, right? And pointing at the website, capturing the data, and analyzing it, right? So you pretend to be a user. And what's good about this method is that you can collect a lot of data. Like you can collect a video of page being loaded, right? Like you cannot do that for a real user, like from real users, from all of your users, right? You have to do it sparingly. Is that the word? Yeah, I think it is. The bad news is that it's only one experience that you collected. Even if you collected 100 of them, even if you collected 1,000 of them, it's nothing comparing to all of your users that visit your website, right? They all come from different places. They all come different times, different devices, different conditions. This does not represent real users. I know, you might ask, like, why the hell are we doing this then? Right? Like, and that's partially the question, right? Like a lot of people concentrate on synthetic monitoring because they kind of like, oh, we want to monitor over time, right? Like, but careful. This is good for analysis of why it is slow, right? And some baseline metrics, like some controlled environment, you can create much easier controlled environment with this technology. But don't confuse that with real users that you have on your website. Please don't. If I say it one more time, do not confuse it with real users. You can hear me talk about it every time I speak. And real users can be measured. And we have this technology called real user measurement, sometimes called real user monitoring, but that's a different story. So the idea here is that you just include a little bit of JavaScript in your website that captures metrics collected by the browser. Because browsers today already collect quite a few performance metrics on their own. And you can also do a little bit of your code writing to aggregate them, to collect them from the browser, or maybe even do a little bit of more precise measurement with user timing and stuff like that. We're not going to dive into that part, but it's quite important as well. And you can collect all of that data. Every page can send data back. Obviously, it cannot send megabytes of data. You cannot do a video stream back, right? Well, users probably don't want that for privacy reasons too, but even without that, you want to collect a little bit of data from each person, right? But in aggregate, and as a distributions that you can calculate, again, I don't want to actually use the word aggregate, but together that data can give you a much better picture about what is the reality of your users. You might find that you have users in another country than you thought you have. You might find that they have less memory, or they have very cheap devices that cannot process your JavaScript as quickly, that fancy React that we all seem not to like personally, but have to work with, right? So you can slice and dice by that data as well. You can see how different populations in your overall distribution of users behave, right? Make reasoning about it. But there is one big business side of it. Like you can connect it to actual business metrics. If your users on your website convert, as we call that oftentimes in the business of internet, right? Either it's a commerce conversion where it's literally a purchase where they bought something, or just navigation through the path that you want the user to navigate to, or another action that they did for that is important for you as a business, right? That is called conversion, and frankly, that's why you built a web page, for user to perform that action, right? So you can correlate your performance metric to your business metrics. And that's where all of those case studies start showing up and say, hey, looks like we can invest into this and gain quite a lot of business benefit. It's not about building new features. It's about building these features better, building them faster, delivering them faster to our users. And sometimes it does mean building different features, right? And stuff like that. But I'm not going to go too deep into that. Remember, metrics and distributions. You don't have one number. Everybody wants one number. Some people even want a score, or a grade or something. But metrics are never one number, right? okay, this is not the talk about statistics and stuff. I gave that talk before, but you will need to understand the basics of statistics, right? Average, just don't use average. Even if you mean median, still don't use median. You know, use higher percentiles. Effectively, do not exclude your users, right? Variability is different in different parts. You look at the full distribution of your metrics, because that will tell you what real users look like, right? I think in August, Eric and I gave a talk here that Alex also worked on with us called 7 Levels of Web Performance Journey, I believe it was called. But basically, we showed that on a histogram, every pixel is a face. It's a real person right there, right? And I feel like this is very powerful. I should probably put that chart here. It is much older version of it, you know. Yeah, just think of distributions. You will thank me later about that. Let's quickly talk about evolution of metrics. I talked to metrics. What is metric? Like, why did you care about metrics? We talked about user experience. Why is metrics, right? The reason that we need metrics is because numbers are how computers do things, right? Like we need to capture something, and that's usually in performance world time-based or some measure of experience, right? Time was the most obvious measurement for many, many years, right? And it's not the only thing we can capture, but that's kind of how we did it. And we started this journey many, many years ago as an industry and as measuring the network, right? Like, because that's where we thought the whole slowness was, right? Like DNS lookups, we thought like, okay, people need to look up where the server is, right? Like it takes time. How long does it take? SSL handshake, well, back in the day we didn't have them all the time like we do today, but like they still take time, right? Server time, right? Time to first byte is a well-known metric that reflects server time, how long your server took to measure. Actually, before these even, we did like how long did my program on the server run, which was even more useless, right? Because it had nothing to do with reality. You thought you had a number and you didn't. Usually people will say, oh, mine takes 10 milliseconds, it's so fast. And it didn't matter whatsoever. You know, first of all, they probably didn't know the truth, didn't measure the full distribution. And second of all, it didn't really manifest to the user the same way. Anyway, what I'm saying is like we started with this network layer and kind of backend layer, right? Like we measured the server, things that we controlled, right? Over time, we realized that web pages became much more complicated, right? They got complex, I meant. They got more components to them, they loaded more resources, so measuring individual requests became less of a useful thing, especially like first HTML request, who cared, right? Like, okay, HTML was fast, the page still didn't show up for a while, right? So we started measuring these metrics called page load, document complete, fully loaded when all resources loaded, things like that represented the whole page as a whole rather than individual first request that usually first metric was about. Funny enough, network metrics apply to every request, but we kind of concentrated only on the first one for whatever reasons. We can talk about political part of it quite a bit separately. So we started measuring the whole page, but over time, it turned out that what computer did, and those metrics, I call them technical metrics, right? The metrics that measure technology didn't matter as much because it turns out what we wanted to measure is what user actually experienced. And we started getting closer to what we talk about today, which is user experience speed rather than technology speed, right? Or web performance or whatever. Yeah, those kind of things. And we realized that there are better metrics like first paint, right? When something painted on the screen, that's much better metric than how long HTML took to download, right? That was kind of like, oh, okay, that's kind of obvious, right? Even though it's kind of upside down, right? Like it's time that nothing happened from the user's perspective rather than time to something happening. But then there were quite interesting metrics like above the fold. If anyone remembers above the fold time, AFT, nobody uses that anymore. But I also want to say it's not a full list, but some of them went away, let's put it this way, because for various reasons. But Speed index was a very interesting measure that kind of related to above the fold time. In synthetic world, it might still be actually quite useful, right? It represents how quickly your experience overall loads, right? So it's not when last frame loaded, but the progression towards that. Like you can have a long time nothing and then something, or everything rather, versus like having incremental load, right? So it was a very useful metric. You will notice that I have these two metrics, two separate lines for these metrics, starting with first paint, and this another metric called first contentful paint. What the hell is the contentful? Nobody understands this word ever. Like I think it was created so people have a feeling that it's meaningful, but actually not common word. And to a degree, that's actually right, because behind every single metric that you work with, there is a particular algorithm how that metric is captured, either inside the browser or industry agreed on how to accumulate different parts of the metrics that captured, like time to first byte. If you ever want to talk to anyone at the CDN what time to first byte means, like which parts of the load do you mean? Anyway, what I want to say is that that algorithm is very particular. Don't confuse the simple words like first paint with simple description what it actually does, right? So to a degree, some of these weird words that we got injected into these metrics, like contentful, which means related to content, but very weird English word. At least to me, I'm a native Russian speaker, so maybe that's just me. But always look up what does the abbreviation and particular metric mean. Don't take it just as an English speaking person to just translate it to something you think happens. Usually you will be wrong. You know, sometimes we're good, but it's rare, I should say. In my experience, I've never been right if I only take it for face value. So now I stopped doing that, right? So that's why I'm kind of put them separately. And frankly, first contentful paint replaced first paint completely, because there were algorithmical problems with the first paint that was solved inside the first contentful paint metric, right? People who make new metrics, they actually like work a lot. They statistically analyze data. They devise algorithms. They look how browsers can or cannot measure something. It keeps happening to this day. That's why the RAM community group exists. That's why Web Performance Group invents new APIs and measurement tools, right? So it's a complicated field. Don't minimize it to just few words. To a degree, SEO partnership that we had this performance field did us a little bit of a disservice because SEO people simplified it way too much, right? Okay, we're not going to talk about that, but they're friends. They're friends. You know, they help promote this topic. So find a good SEO person. They walk into the rooms that you don't walk into, right? So please help work with them together. But remember to help them get educated. Show them a slide like this. Show them what each metric means, stuff like that. So, core web vitals. How many of you are familiar with the term? How many know every metric to a full degree and an expert? Okay, okay. Catherine says she is perfect. She knows this shit. Perfect.
No, I still don't know what content is.
Exactly, exactly. You know, like, nobody does. I actually don't know who came up with the name, but you know, I might need to dig it up. So, before we go into a little more detail about them, notice the progression, right? Core web vitals are a set of metrics that are closest to user experience. I have this slide only to show you that we are trying to move closer to being able to measure what experience the user has. And I usually, if you attended my other talks deeper on this matter, you know, like I have this analogy, like even if we put the metal detector or whatever, the metal machine in your brain, we will probably be better at measuring this shit, but probably not very much closer, right? So all of this is a progression towards understanding of the level of frustration people have with speed of user experience, right? It's never actual measurement of frustration, right? Like, I mean, It's very, me saying that makes it obvious, right? But so that progression is ongoing, and this is our best choice today, right? For various reasons. So let's go quickly. Introduced by Google's team into standards. Well, first they implemented it, then they promoted into standards and stuff like that. We can talk about standardization process separately, but effectively it was chosen and well promoted, so now most of the people talking about web performance know Core Web Vitals, especially SEO people, as I said. And what they did, they decided to categorize all the millions of metrics into 3 groups. One representing loading performance, another one representing interactivity, and the third one representing visual stability of the experience. In picking the best metric that represents it, to show people that you can use, if you concentrate on one metric, here are 3 for you. I know, sounds weird, but okay. Basically, concentrating on part of user experience, they are that together combined into better coverage of overall user experience. Obviously, it doesn't tell us things about everything, but these are 3 pillars, let's call it that way. And they also did pick the metrics and also introduce the thresholds, green, yellow, red. Before Core Web Vitals, we didn't have universally agreed upon green, yellow, red. To tell you the truth, experts in the field do not agree on these either. But that's not what for everybody else to think, right? We need at least people to start concentrating and have thresholds to target before they can understand why something doesn't matter for them or doesn't match their experience. We're not going to go deeper on that, but basically it's these 3 pillars with particular algorithms and thresholds. Let's quickly go about each one of them. Loading of user experience, right? This category represents how quickly things show up. And specifically, largest, contentful, paint. Which kind of means that things that actually are content, like largest background is bigger than anything else on the page, obviously, right? But that doesn't matter, right? What matters is actual content, right? So you can think of it that way. And when it got painted on the screen, not just downloaded, not just this or that, like not just thought of, not just discovered, but actually painted on the screen, right? In fact, latest developments in this metric actually show you additional value that represents when it was as close to painted as the browser can get. Not every browser supports it. Mostly Chrome supports it now. Chromium, sorry, browsers support that. But basically, there is more and more to be developed there, but ultimately this picks the largest element. It's only if it's an image or a text node or a poster image within a video. I believe video itself is not included anymore. If you're wondering, we had a talk about video performance a few months ago. You might want to check that out. You know, it was much bigger talk than just this. But basically, this is a good metric. I think this is our best metric for things showing up today. I think everybody agrees. That's why it is the leading this loading experience category. So you want to track that, basically. This is your main metric to track. Most likely, your business people will care about this one more than anything else, for better or for worse. Keep in mind that the fact that browser detects the largest element, and it can be a different element for different user at different experience, especially because of responsiveness and things like that. This metric might be more complicated in aggregate. Like when you look at the distribution, you will see weirdness, like multimodal distribution, things like that, where, oh, half of it represents a text node, which is the title of my page, and half of it represents the carousel image, that is the top biggest image. Oh, that's probably because your image is bigger or smaller based on the screen size, right? That's the most common challenge with this metric. Yeah. Good news is that that metric actually reports which element. It's called attribution. There are a lot of attribution that you can collect through real user measurement and stuff like that. And you can analyze it through synthetic as well, right? So it's possible to dig up what happened. Why is my metric goes south or north? It's kind of funny how we in Northern Hemisphere use these words. We need to talk to Australians what they think about this terminology. Anyway, what else to say here? Largest contentful paint. Yes, there are. If you are very expert in this metric, you might want to know that there are now LCP subparts. There are 4 other metrics that you can measure to understand kind of categorically, basically break down the problems into categories, right? So if you want to check it out, if you are like on top of your LCP game, next step is to maybe look at LCP subparts to see maybe it will give you an easier way of determining what to do, right? I'm not going to go into depth on that, but like just wanted to mention that. It's by the way, relatively recent development. Okay. Next is interactivity metric. For all of us React lovers over here, very much love and hate relationship. Everybody uses it, and everybody slows down their website with React. React is bad. Did I say that? No? No. Okay. Like, you got my point. We can talk after the talk if you need details. But effectively, JavaScript or any other technology that takes time in your process, in your computer, running while you look at the page, can degrade the experience. The most common examples as you scroll your page, if it's jittery, that's the most common one, but there are more other experiences that can be bad. And that's effectively this metric basically tells you how much that happens. Let's put it simply. There was a different metric leading this category before called first input delay that got booted because it didn't do a great job. This one is now the winner. And it continues to be the winner. It's complicated and all of that, but I think we developed a whole sub-industry where people actually understand this shit. What caused the INP, right? Like, it's like a lot of analysis of flame charts in dev tools and stuff like that, understanding why React does what it does, or this and that and whatever. And mostly it comes from the fact that browsers are JavaScript in the browser is mostly single-threaded. Right? Majority of execution on the web page is single thread for rendering, for loading, loading, strike that. No, loading is no longer happens in the same thread. Execution, parsing, things like that, right? So if your JavaScript does a lot of JavaScripting, your rendering cannot happen. Simple, right? It's not simple. It's complicated, but this is the best metric you got. In fact, there is now INP subparts as well. There are 3 new subpart metrics that kind of help you understand in more detail what's going on. But the good news is that this metric, unlike the other one, measures between interaction all the way to the next paint on the screen. Before that, we kind of concentrated mostly on like the delay part of it, but now it covers more spot, kind of closer to the user experience. Hence, you see the theme in this talk, right? At least the numbers section of it, right? So this metric is the best metric you got. Notice the thresholds; they're pretty harsh, right? 200 milliseconds for the slowest of your measurements, right? Because interactions happen many times, delays are measured multiple times. The reported one is the slowest one users had on the page, right? And it's still at 200 to keep it good. So if you run some React, did I say anything about React before? You might want to see what that number is. Again, I'm not fanatical about React, just want to say React one more time. And the third category is visual stability. People don't like this one. They kind of don't relate to that because it's like, okay, my computer did the same amount of work. Like I didn't write bad JavaScript or my network was good, right? Why? What's going on? Like, why do you even care? Like, we don't care about this. And I think this one is actually the most important one, or at least very important one. And I'll talk about it a little later of why I feel that way, and hopefully you will feel the same way. Effectively, it measures how much shifting around on a page happened as your page loaded. And when I say that, it doesn't really, like, I mean, some of you can relate to that, but it's very hard to feel it, right? Like, what does shifting around mean? Well, all of those ads moving around as you try to read that ad-funded website, right, Catherine? Yes, yes. Or things like because of the way your JavaScript application decided to enhance the page, suddenly shifted things around the moment this finally kicked in. Yeah. So the metric, unfortunately, is not the same number, right? It's not a time metric. So it's a metric that is harder to understand, but you can think about it as the percentage of the screen that moved around cumulatively, right? Not overall, but like not one big thing moved, but like as things were moving around, if you sum them up, how much of it accounted for the size of the screen. So sometimes this number is bigger than one, So it can be like in and out, left, right. Like you've probably seen those experiences yourself, but maybe never measured them. The threshold is 0.1, which means 10% of the screen moved around, right? So it's not very hard to reach, actually, if you want to do what you want to do. Many sites are actually okay with it, but not everybody. And you need to be intentional about making this well. By default, this will not happen, basically. You need to be intentional. There are many technical methods for it and stuff like that. So good news, bad news. As of this January, I believe, or like basically end of last year, Core Web Vitals are part of all three browsers. 4 browsers, 3 engines, right? So Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit, right? WebKit is Safari browser on iOS devices and Apple devices, macOS included. Firefox is Firefox, and Chromium is Chrome and Edge, Microsoft's browser, right? So quite a lot of coverage. That's great news. That's thanks to Interop project that is run by a lot of people in the standards community, right? And every year they pick the set of things to concentrate on, and browsers fund that kind of work. Last year we finally funded this work. The bad news, I mentioned bad news. Bad news is that CLS is not included. LCP and INP went in. Again, it's complicated because to us, they're just metrics. In to browsers, there are many components that need to happen before they happen. So I'm not going to bore you with all of the little details, but mostly INP and the LCP went in. CLS did not get in. It does not mean that they decided it's not worth doing at all. It's complicated. It's harder to accomplish. To measure it without impacting user experience itself, right? Let's not forget the important part here, right? The actual user experience, Measuring is, I don't want to say easy. Like, anyway. So it's not part of Interop for this year, unfortunately, either. But we, as an industry, want to make it happen, so we'll keep pushing. When next time October, November runs around, and there is a voting for next Interop season, and I'm asking you to please go vote, please do so. If I don't ask you, please look it up and go vote for these things, right? Interop obviously applies to other APIs in the browser, CSS, JavaScript, whatever, right? Like performance is not only APIs that is being worked on. I mentioned that Core Web Vitals are the best metrics we got. And that's primarily because large players in the market, like browser vendors, finally pushed it through, right? Google put a lot of effort into it. Other browsers worked on that as well, and they happened. However, neither Google nor RAM vendors who are mostly the players in this space, know your product. They work on all of our products in aggregate. Google cannot make a metric for your website. They make a metric that can be collected automatically from every website. So does Run Provider. Run Provider cannot invest as much effort into instrumenting your website. They can only instrument, not only. They can instrument everything, but financially it's more profitable to them to have a turnkey solution that you just enable after you paid the money, right? Hopefully you paid the money, because those people need jobs too, right? The problem with that is that metrics do not necessarily represent your user's experience to the full that you can measure. I did give a couple talks before about how you can do some of that. In fact, there is some new standardization coming around since the talk I gave. There is the element timing API that came out. Now there is a new API called container timing that comes out, where you as a developer can define what you measure on your website better to match your product, right? Like if most important part on your e-commerce website is for someone to click that buy button, you can instrument that moment. When is that button clickable? When is my primary carousel image visible? You would say LCP does that, but maybe that's never a largest contentful paint, right? Maybe there are challenges with that metric. Anyway, all I'm saying, you as an engineer have enough tools to do that kind of instrumentation. And why would you do that? That's because your user's experience is not the same experience as other websites' experience, right? You cannot have one number that represents all. However, it is harder. You need to convince every product manager to care first, then to spend time, money in defining and instrumenting those metrics. It is very challenging, I can tell you that. So, as much as I'm trying to give you better future, that future might never come. So, don't be in despair if you cannot perfectly measure, right? Remember I mentioned you can only get that far in measurement. Even if you get this number, it's never the metal thing in your brain. In the user's brain, sorry. In your brain maybe, but not in a user's brain, right? It never represents the reality of frustration. So as much as we want perfection, that perfection is around 70%, even at best, right? Again, this is rough estimate. Okay. Numbers. Why am I talking about numbers so much? You probably know why, because you need to measure. If you didn't build your own RAM solution, I built this tool before called UX Speed Calculator. In fact, Eric, my co-speaker, and Alex, three of us are trying to rebuild this tool to be even better. But this is a tool that I built while I was at Meetup, who could not afford to buy a real user management solution, or rather wanted a proof. And I tried to help them understand the numbers, right? So this is a very numbery tool right now. We hope to make it less numbery, a little more relatable, but right now it's a very numbery tool. You can see all of these little things to move around, right? So for example, you can say, whoa, this is the total money value of these users. If I have more users, I get more money. Oh, that's kind of obvious, right? Or where is it? Value of the customer. If I charge them, if I charge them a little more, I get more money, right? But on the speed side, if I make things slow, I make less money. If I make things fast, I make more money, right? So it helps you model how do metrics relate to each other. This is completely fake data. It's a model, nothing about your website, right? But if you need to understand how numbers relate to each other, to a degree, I mean, this is still a very complicated statistical bullshit, but if you want to have that slightly better feeling and want to show what metrics are, how distributions actually look. Many people think distribution is a bell curve, right? This is not how performance metrics look. They look like log normal distributions, just saying. Anyway, if you want to feel for it, this might be a tool that you can use to play around. Again, it's called UX Speed Calculator. Notice I already used the word UX speed there. By the way, this is the variability number, right? You can be fast in absolute, but your number can vary. You see how that 95th percentile is flying away, right? While your average stays around in this about the same place, right? Anyway, yeah, that's one tool. So numbers. Another tool for numbers is the tool that Mike presented recently here at the Meetup. I'm a maintainer for this tool. It's called Telescope. Again, previous tool emulated real user monitoring, right? Like it wasn't real user monitoring. Real user monitoring, it was simulated data. Obviously, you should buy a real user monitoring tool to actually grab the real data, or you should get a free one from a company like Cloudflare. You know, you get what you pay for, but ultimately, you know, more money means more control, more tuning and stuff like that. So this is called Telescope. This is the tool that we released in November. And the tool is a synthetic tool. Remember I said you can pretend there is a browser, there is a real user, sorry, and you can point the browser at the website. We built a tool that supports all the engines that you can run. We used Playwright. We didn't do any magic. We used pre-existing tool that was built luckily for us, right? But we used that Playwright not to do like visual testing, but we built it to collect performance metrics in synthetic way. Again, for analysis, right? Yes, you can do that for monitoring and kind of trend setting kind of thing, but these are not real measurements. Remember that. So let me try. I actually didn't prepare for that, but let me try demoing that maybe. Yeah, so let's hope that works. Telescope, does that work? Nope. npx Cloudflare / telescope. What it means is that I didn't have it installed globally. Well, I'm working on it. I cannot have a global install, but anyway. We recently pushed it as an NPM module, so you can do this now, and you can say URL. Who wants to analyze the website? https:// Alex?
Let's try Wikipedia, maybe.
Wikipedia. Wiki. Oh yeah, that's a protocol that doesn't exist. That's right. Oh crap. Sorry. Control E.
What about Google?
And I'm sorry.
What about Google?
Too much. Too much. Yeah. I'm sorry.
You use the homepage for the
Nah, no. Come on.
Someone use my website?
I'm sorry.
My website for my.
Okay, let's do Wikipedia first, and then we can do another. So, which browser? Firefox, Safari, Chrome. Firefox. I don't know that browser. I'm kidding. I do know that browser. So what it does. Okay, my demo didn't work. So let's go back to the presentation. But effectively, you can. It would work if I didn't work my APIs and networks this morning, which is hilarious. Yeah, but the idea is that you can. It will capture a few resources. It will capture metrics. It will capture HAR file, which stands for HTTP archive file, which is the representation of all the network activity. It will capture the video. It will generate the screenshots and stuff like that. And you can upload the result to this website, which is called telescopetest.io, which we also built as a public instance. We actually plan to release it as an NPM module that you can just run on your own. You don't have to use this website, but priorities, you know. And you can load that, upload the zip file. You can zip it up and upload it into this website, and you will be able to see the metrics, right? We mentioned a couple metrics. Not all metrics can be captured in synthetic that exist in RAM. For example, interaction to next paint can be captured because there is no user to interact with anything. You can pretend there is a user doing interaction and capture the metric, but we talked about reality of the user to begin with, right? But anyway, so there is some work around that. But network metrics for the first request, famous time to first byte. What does that mean? is answered finally. This is exactly what it means. If you don't mean that, you can uncheck this box and look at all the markers and pick the one you actually like to measure against. You know, but so this is like a new chart that we built. I want to make it a little better looking because right now it's like a little overlapping, but ultimately the idea was to give you the depth if you wanted it, right? Waterfall chart, this is what we usually capture and measure and discuss at Meet for Speed sessions, right? Why did this JavaScript load here and not here? Why is there so much JavaScript to begin with, right? All of those kind of things, right? Yeah, enough said. And so on. Film strip, right? Like this opens people's eyes very well, especially if it's a business. You're like, oh, this is how long your website didn't show anything. And then didn't show anything useful for a long time. And then, well, in this case, it actually did okay. You know, but a lot of times it's like, oh, I didn't know we don't show anything useful that I spent all of my budget building until moment X. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of why we're here. And so on. Anyway, synthetic tool, open source completely. You can contribute, you can use Apache license, yada, yada, yada. Please join the community. Not this. This is embarrassing. Okay. QR codes, you can scan them if you like.
Where is it? Telescope.what?
Well, Telescope is Cloudflare Telescope is just on GitHub. Telescope test.io is the web version of the UI. Telescope agent itself doesn't have the UI, it provides the files. UI is this web version. Again, we will publish a separate NPM package that will just run your local web version. It's actually in the works already. We have a PR being worked on. You know. Yeah. Now, I spent most of this freaking time talking about numbers. Jesus Christ. That kind of tells you how much numbers needed, right? I don't like numbers. I don't want numbers. I want fast user experience. I don't want numbers. And that's why I'm renaming this shit to UX Speed. Because I want it to be user experience and not technology. Not numbers, not algorithms, not nothing, this and that. Who am I to say that? But you know, you can follow my direction in there, right? But I don't want to brag. It's your good device in a good network in the middle of Manhattan. Well, not middle, but downtown. But still, close to the fiber sites of the world, in the office of Cloudflare where it's hosted. Technically coming from you from New York, by the way.
You hosted it in East, that's connection.
I'm sorry?
You hosted it in East, you got hosted in Central.
It's hosted on Cloudflare, close to the user.
Okay.
Thank you for promoting our product, right there. I'm saying right now to him and the most of you, it comes from New York, most likely. It doesn't have to be, but you know. Anyway, each exhibit represents different part of slowness, and there are probably more exhibits to build, but effectively, if you go to this input abyss exhibit, this shows you, like, if you click on the bottom scrubber shows you which one is slower and faster, right? It basically tells you which button. And if you press the button, like, oh, this one is 0 milliseconds, immediately reacts to your press. The moment you get to 300, it's annoying. Notice that it's yellow because that actually is the INP threshold, right? But even at 200, you kind of start like feeling something is off, right? And at this, you're like, holy hell, I'm out of here. This is ridiculous. I want to kill this computer kind of thing. I want to throw my phone. 4% of people acknowledge that they, once in their life, thrown the phone because the experience was slow. Expensive shit, you know? Anyway, so this is the press reaction. The second one is typing in. If you type in 50 milliseconds, that's kind of okay. With 300 milliseconds, Jesus, this is well, actually the control is broken. I might need to fix it, but like it's crazy annoying. And hopefully you being annoyed at that on your own phone shows you how your users feel when this happens, right? This is checkboxes. Press these checkboxes. How many times do we press checkboxes? It's just like, oh my God, this is how this happens. People send freaking API before they update the checkbox. It's not fictional. This is reality. This happens in the life, right? Or maybe the JavaScript just happens to be JavaScripting while you press the checkbox, right? So this is the, I'm sorry?
Are you showing that? It's like such a common sense that it is annoying. What's the purpose?
Until you press and feel it in your spine.
That I feel it every day. Is there many purposes?
Because your boss and your designer or your colleague, they do not realize that this is not bad code or bad design, but actually bad user experience speed. They think it's quality. People think they can measure time and the reason about time, they can't. They need to feel it to understand. When you say, oh, I'm web performance engineer, they're like, okay. And when you say, oh, I make that button feel good, they can relate to that much better. And hopefully, many engineers will remember that they're not optimizing the protocol or API call or JavaScript volume or bundling. They're optimizing the speed at which this checkbox freaking checks that box, because this is annoying as hell if it's too slow. Like I mean, hopefully you felt that. Hopefully you don't feel it generally, but you know. So a couple more exhibits, I just want to show them off. This one is called Unfortunate Shift. The common experience, you have some kind of not the dialogue, but part of the UI that is like, okay, danger zone, it would delete. No, I don't want to delete. Oh shit, it shifted as it loaded right when I tried to click it. And it deleted all of my freaking data. Or bought a $542 product I didn't mean to buy, right? And so, I mean, it's all just hypothetical examples. It doesn't look really how checkout cart looks, but maybe I could develop something more relatable too, but you know. And this is where I might need to update this to make it feel more natural, because right now it's a little more convoluted, but you know. Anyway.
Is it built in React?
It tried to, by the way, all of it is vibe coded. I had to put effort into telling it not to use React and Tailwind. So yes, it's not built in React. This is called the layout leap. So basically on the bottom, you can drag how much layout shift you want to compare, right? And on the left, you have the leaping one, and on the right is stable. And then you can press replay if you didn't catch it for the first time. Okay, I'm trying to read this. Oh, crap. Oh, crap. The crap is the indication that something is going wrong, right? And if you use Russian verbs, that will obviously be also quite, maybe more reflective. Anyway, it kind of tries to give you a relationship between CLS and the feeling a little bit as well. But the main thing is like, yeah, metric is good and useful, but the feeling that you get, this is what we're talking about. Those advertising sites that keep shoving things in, or your own freaking carousel that couldn't allocate space is ridiculous, right? You shouldn't have done that. Right? And the last one is actually the most obvious, the slow starter, right? The one on the left just started rendering later. For whatever reason, doesn't matter why, right? Like, it just slower, and this is how much faster it could be. Right? You know, and all of it, like, it took the same amount of time to load, right? Except it started later, right? Anyway, took me a long time to finally do it, but I think we need this feeling, this experience. It's like you go with the kids into museum for the experience. I think we need those kids to go and experience this. You know. Anyway, museum. So, as much as we love our numbers, our algorithms, our technology, processes, algorithms. Did I mention algorithms yet? Yeah. So basically all of those metrics and protocols and waterfall charts. I urge you not to forget this. I know we're all engineers here, most of us at least are, right? But I think we need to start, and hopefully you already do that, talking to other people who don't understand all of this jibber jabber that we do about technology, or our desire to enjoy this numeric thing or scientific statistical thing, and talk about this stuff where it just sucks. It's just slow and it sucks. Caroline's word, not mine. So I want to quickly go about, and I'm a little over time, quite a bit actually, but I want to talk about the part where we can design the experience to be fast to begin with, before we start building it, right? And this work kind of emerged quite a bit ago, like Kent Alstad at Velocity 2015. Actually, my bag is older than that from Velocity, but he talked about the fact that a lot of our designers are painters. They paint final picture. And back then, responsiveness was not a thing, so it was even more obvious, like Photoshop picture, right, instead of like responsive experience. But even now, when they paint the responsive experience, it's what it looks at the end of page load. And the reality is, if it takes seconds to load, it is a movie clip, short movie clip. You need to be a director directing that experience. If you're not doing it, you're just deluding yourself into thinking that it just shows up. You know it doesn't. Your phone tells you it doesn't when you open the website, but you kind of like, oh, it's just a technical problem. I don't know. We don't do this here in this department, right? And engineers are like, well, you didn't tell me what to do, so I did it however I liked, right? Like I used my favorite framework, React, and it worked. Everybody needs to know React to get hired, so I will use that, right? And Redux, right? And the REST APIs. And I will forget to use CDN and do any network optimizations or open the waterfall chart to understand why the hell is it so slow. Because you never told me. I mean, it's not my job to define the experience. You're a designer. You're a product manager, right? So designers should become directors of short movie clips. Tim Kadlec, our very own product manager on the team here now, actually, and overall very well-known person in the space, gave a talk at our own WebPerf Days New York in 2014, where he talked about performance choreography and drew analogy between animators and animation and how they study time and how things need to be natural in that, like when they draw the transition between a person being here and here or the hand going up. It cannot just like do weird shit. It needs to follow particular things. I mean, Alex took a 4-year degree to learn this stuff, right? It's a very complicated shit. Sorry for using the word shit so often. But I feel like we can learn from that choreography, right? Or design of speed, or progressive storyboarding, which is another term I'm trying to create for defining how speed happens, right? And as technologists, we need to learn to build for those designs. If you try designing your page to progress how you want it, you will need to implement that, right? We already talk about progressive enhancement with features, and the word progressive enhancement is well known, right? For technologies that browsers support, right? Like I will either use a polyfill or this and stuff like that, right? But I feel like enhancing which technology operates your website as the page loads is probably equally important, right? Just do HTML for things that need to show up immediately. Embed your SVG logo into freaking HTML. Do not have a megabyte logo loading from another domain. Just saying. Or draw it with JavaScript maybe after your React app hydrates, right? Anyway, we're not going to talk about individual technologies here today. What I'm saying is that to match the design that was designed to be progressive, you need to build the strategy of how to implement that. You need to know which things can be extremely fast and which things cannot be. And you need some other solutions and stuff like that. Because we know things cannot just immediately happen. Designers kind of know too, but they kind of say it's a technical problem. But it's on you to figure out what needs to happen and what is the progression that we want to achieve. Great book by Filament Group about progressive enhancement in general. Has a few things on the topic of other side of it, like Scott Gell is one of the authors. He was a speaker here before. Check that out. But that primarily talks about that other aspect of progressive enhancement of polyfilling and kind of applying technology if it's available in the browser. Obviously, responsive design is part of it, right? Like all of those. There is, I believe, there is a little bit about the loading aspect of it as well here. But Alex and I started the website a while ago called Speed Patterns, and I'm planning to finally publish more articles to it. But this website is concentrating on patterns for designers, how to speed things up. You already witnessed some of the museum portion of it. This is basically like a solutioning for those bad experiences, right? Like the fast start. Remember that slow starter thing, right? It basically describes that there are things can take time to start, and there are multiple reasons. You cannot just say, "Oh, our server was slow," or "My internet provider was slow." There are reasons that are very learnable, right? Like either the server is just slow, literally, or your low rendering actually happens late. You don't know why, right? As a designer, you don't care why, but you can probably talk to your engineers why, and they will tell you why, because they probably will know if they come to Meet for Speed session at our meetup. And here are a few notes on which metrics to track, right? Immutable layout, the term that I came up with. I don't know if it's a very good representative term. Maybe stable layout is another word, but basically same experience. Takes the same time to show up this ad on this fake website. But one is annoying and another one is, it's an ad. It's annoying to a degree, but at the same time, it's better.
You stole this from me.
Did I?
I don't know who published it first.
I was born long ago.
Okay.
No. Catherine gave a great talk about ads experience 2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
slide on this. Don't push your
It's already available on YouTube. You should go check out New York Web Performance. Shit, it's wrong name now. Meetup on YouTube. I'm sorry?
You can do it in React. This is achievable in React.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't say that React is bad at everything. In fact, React is just a tool. You can be implementing things right? It's just practice. Bad practices that are established in React community. Let's put it this way. There are some words here about how to accomplish it. A couple more real quick. I did publish one article today, but there are 10 more coming. Open source, by the way, you can all check it out in the GitHub. But skeletal designs, Alex and I spent quite a bit of time writing it up. It's about how to do a good skeletal design, right? Many of you probably saw the gray boxes, shimmering gray boxes or something like that, or a few other patterns that slept on, right? Because we didn't design. Like our designers told us to not show empty space, so we created the design, what is it called? Design system component for shimmering things, gray boxes, right? Don't do that. Do this. Do progressive loading. We have some little bit of theoretical understanding of it. Like, don't do this, right? The layout should be what it will be when things load, right? You want the layout not to shift from, God knows, some circle and couple lines into another circle with an image, right? Like, this is not useful. Sure, it's not empty. Yeah, sure. Okay. You did the first step in a 1,000-mile walk, but come on. You should have designed it, right? Same goes about this, like when boxes are not the same right? You cannot predict. Well, figure out something better, right? Like find a way to make it a little bit better. In fact, I would argue that preloading layout, yes, you probably need to preload layout, right? You need to read the data. Yes, there is no way without it. But you can be more aggressive about reading some layout data versus reading all the data, right? It requires sometimes some ingenious technological solutions that are not common practice today, but it can be. It's not that hard to solve. Anyway, last but not least, this is my favorite. If you ever heard me talk about carousels, you know that these images are almost identical. There is no reason to wait for everything to load before displaying a carousel. Display the first slide of the carousel, then make it a carousel. Let users see the first slide, which was your intention to begin with, right? Like you won the game, corporate game of whose content will be on the homepage. You are the first slide. Well, get yourself a prize. Don't just wait. Anyway. It sounds obvious, but there are a few other common examples. But these are like, you don't always build a map website or video player. Well, video players most of us build or buy, right, or something. But sort filters or tab panels. Like I was vibe coding on my live stream the other day. That's what I do. And somebody came over and said, "Oh, you are a web performance expert. Like, help me optimize this thing." 10 tabs, waiting for all of them to load before showing the first one. That's why there are tabs and not the same page under a thing. Show the first tab, render the rest later, right? Load the rest. Anyway, I'm just saying it was actually much more complicated than that. There was quite a bit of React involved, and other JavaScript and WebAssembly for that matter. But we found a solution, at least the one that got them somewhere, right? Basically, all I'm saying, I know I'm advertising my websites as part of my talk, but that's not necessarily the intent. The intent is care about speed of user experience, not the technology.
So one of the last slides you showed about the carousel, you mentioned that we should display the first carousel or the first image and then load the carousel later. Wouldn't that affect the layout shift for the page? Because things will be loaded?
No, if you, sorry, let me load it. Let me open it real quick. Nope. Yeah, I closed it, sorry. Convert on arrival. That's the name I came up with. So, why would load actually shift things around?
The first one, you were just loading one image. The other one, you're actually re-rendering the entire component.
Your words, not mine. You don't have to re-render. What I'm saying is that sometimes these solutions require more engineering, right? And better understanding of how to build that. But ultimately, the basic, simple example, by the way, even the first image can shift, right? Because if you didn't define the dimensions, it will, like, the moment the image is requested, it doesn't know how big it is, right? It will need to load the first few bytes of an image to calculate, to understand the aspect ratio, then apply the CSS, and then you will know, right? You can be proactive about it, right? Like you can build better CSS, HTML structure as a first version, and then your JavaScript that will enhance either traditional JavaScript frameworks or web component, right? Like there is a link to web components way of doing this, where web component will take over the component, and you can't do it wrong even with web components, by the way. Like, come watch the talk by Scott Gell a couple months ago, who talked about that specifically, right? Or not about bad side of it, but how to do it right? But you can make no JavaScript version become a JavaScript version without layouts. Sure, you will need to display some of these pieces incrementally, right? Or enable them to be interactable, right? Like, it's a design choice. You can choose how you want it. I can have my opinions, but it's up. Every designer chooses that, right? A button can show up, but be disabled until JavaScript kicks in, or not show up, always be enabled but not be clickable, you pay the price, but maybe that's okay for your use case, right? That's a choice that you and your designer should be making rather than expecting developer to design your experience. Just saying, you know. If you say that to a designer, they're like, oh God, yes, please don't. You know.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Great talk, thank you. I saw on one of the slides or pages, you mentioned request idle callback. I just started using that. I wanted to get your take on use cases. When should we use it? When should we not? What are your recommendations there?
I don't know enough about it. I'm not an expert on that. Your engineer should talk to your designer first. Ask them what are they trying to achieve, right? And then make a solution. It actually comes also to the measurement and remeasurement and the validation as well. Sometimes we do go for a particular technology, and I don't mean you are doing that right now, but I mean in general, we are solving a problem that doesn't exist. Designers didn't ask you to do that. They didn't ask you anything, but it doesn't mean that they asked you to do something particular. You talk to a designer, in my experience, or a business person, and the answer is not what you thought it is. They would be very different. Again, I'm not saying that's for this particular case, but I cannot intelligently talk about that particular technology right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we had, what's his name? Rich Harris and the other framework creators who were like, that's what they do, right? I mean, I don't know enough.
Okay.
Sorry, before we go for the next question. If you noticed on the very first slide, second slide with my face on it, I stroke out the word engineer and put the word designer there. I want to be a designer. Nobody will make me a designer, but I want to be a designer. I want to design the experiences that we build and help our graphics designers understand the technical challenges of that, right? But technology itself is not as important as long as you know what you're trying to achieve.
It's kind of great pivot into my question, because you mentioned that your designers have to be directors and direct experience, and then you show that museum when you give that feel. Often you will hear from designers, we don't know how to do that. How do you make them do that? That's impossible. They just don't know. And
Okay.
you can be a designer because you shifted from engineer.
Okay.
Is it a new profession?
If you put me in a room with designers, they'll be like, "Who is this person?" You know. So no, let me answer that in this way. They don't know.
Okay.
Neither do you. You need to
Well,
figure it out together.
Software engineer knows but
software
doesn't care.
engineer doesn't
Designer
know.
doesn't know but does care. How do you marry those?
They care. That is actually the discovery that I made. After in a few recent jobs that I had where I worked with designers quite a bit. I mean, I've always worked with designers closely. That's kind of how I came about all of this. Like, I didn't like Rust as much as I like UI, right? Sorry, no offense to Rust. They care. They care about user experience more than you think. If you bring this and describe to them the approach, the technological challenge, that they cannot just get it fast. It needs to be designed with technology in mind, but so is responsive design, so is web, so is native design for native app applications. So even chat experiences with our favorite robotic overlords, you know, even that needs to be designed, right? Every design thrives with constraints. Every artist thrives with constraints, right? Within the constraints of the environment, medium, whatever that is, they just don't know about the constraint. They just never knew that their paint was discrete and not like incremental or whatever. Sorry, wrong words, but you know what I mean. Like, they didn't know the medium is different. And it's more expressive. In my experience working with designers at last 3 companies, was the moment you empower them, they realize what's going on. They understand the concept of gray boxing being negative and how you can provide the solution for developers to actually implement. Because today they suffer. They give them the image and back comes out an image in the end, maybe, right? Most of the time, the image in the end of the page load matches the picture, right? But they want to provide the experience. Alex worked with me on a few of these things. As a designer and artist, can talk to it.
So, just to clarify first, the question was basically like, why don't designers do this to begin with? Like, how do you communicate with a designer to actually get them to design the experience, as it were, to not just design static things? So the first thing is that one of the reasons designers are like this nowadays, probably, or continue to be like this rather, is first off because, as Sergey put it, is oftentimes the current generation of designers don't realize what the constraints are, or rather, it's not so much constraints, it's more like possibilities and what they would have to put on the page. The reason is partially much of their training comes from usually things like either product design or publication design, I would say. The mindset is essentially that they're designing like brochures or catalogs or something, because that's where a lot of the designers came from when the web took off, basically, because it didn't exist before then. That's what they were designing usually. And much of the philosophy of websites was to essentially design that. It's just a digital brochure, especially for e-commerce and stuff. That's what people wanted because that's what businesses knew to begin with anyway. And that's what they wanted to provide. It just allowed them to do it over the web to reach a multitude of users that could communicate you remotely and have you send stuff to them and so on. So that's where a lot of this kind of design thinking, I guess, came from. And that's why they are often limited to it, or they have to fall back on this thinking without knowing kind of their options or possibilities. Like interactive elements, things looking different as they load. As well as like animations and so on. Again, we have more of this stuff nowadays, obviously, than we did before as well. And it's hard enough to keep up for tech people with all the new innovations, probably, you can imagine. Even harder for designers because they do not follow this space and are not aware of it. Newer generations of designers are more aware of kind of like motion graphics and sort of things changing as they go. Although even then, like, the training in education systems often doesn't keep up with that well either. So many might come out of a college and go to their first job also having to fall back on publication design and like static design stuff, for example. So that is changing, but basically talking to your designers again and giving them a chance to understand that they need to consider these elements and that they have options and possibilities of using and creating moving, interactive and changing things, and that they need to account for that, will help them think through that, and they will begin to do so, not forcing effectively engineers and developers to have to make those decisions, which they're not usually at the design portion of the process, because that's not really their job. They shouldn't be doing that in their minds. And
I would want
frankly,
to say even more so, I think you can give them a gift. And I think in political environment, which is design engineering relationships, you don't want to just tell them, hey, you designers have no clue about engineering. You can give them a gift of accomplishing something instead of engineering doing it. You can tell them, hey, it's your win. You won $10 million to our company because you cared, you designed it to be well done. They will still attribute to you something, right? And you go to your VP and say, hey, designers told us to do, but we actually did it, right? And we helped and we guided them. But give them a win of designing the experience, which is what they're supposed to do, which they love doing. And they actually, the moment you befriend them, the same way I said you should befriend your SEO friends, right? If you befriend them, they will be on your side. It just takes a while, but what I found, again, back to that finding, it's much easier than you think. They care more than you think. Let's put it this way. Again, they're designers, they're not engineers. You need to learn how to speak properly with people. Sorry, not about you, but in general, we engineers are a little awkward and weird and wear T-shirts that nobody does, right? Or I was joking that designers and DevOps people don't look at each other when they meet in the corridor, right? And everything in between is like not particularly better, right? So, they go to different parties and drink different champagne, or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to wrap,
Okay.
do the last thought real quick before I pass it on is one interesting thing where this sort of attention to development and technical aspects as well as design are kind of married more is if you pay attention to things like the video game space, both sides are more aware of these elements in development of video games, because in the case of video games, they are not just a design product and they're not just a web product, because in a web product, there's the end goal, basically, which is, again, we're talking about kind of brochures delivering sort of the marketplace. Oftentimes, that's what a lot of business is done in. That it's the thing that's being provided and the services that are provided through the web, which is the end goal. And basically, the user's goal is to get to the service, and if they have to wait, then they can wait, basically, is a common sentiment, basically. Whereas in video games, what is being provided is the experience itself, meaning you can't avoid having it work well, basically. You have to make it fast, and it has to be fast all the time. So people designing for those things are often far more aware of these relationships and everything having to work not only in real time, but quickly.
It's not informational product, it is the experience product.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And even when it's conveying information, because menus are a big part of that kind of experience, it all has to be designed with this in account. So they might have more insights of how these two things can be married. So if you know somewhere where to talk to people who engage in this, they might be a useful source of information of how you can replicate this in web development, particularly for front end, but even for back end, because that's also a big part of games nowadays. Okay, that's enough for me. I'll pass it on.
Yeah, and if you go to colleges, tell them, hey, you probably should talk about this between. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for the talk. Particularly interesting, I think, one thing I found really interesting about your talk is how you went through the evolution of what we're able to measure, what became important, and it's really interesting to see how it's gone from the numbers to the user experience thing, and knowing that you're on the committee, and knowing that Core Web Vitals, which I'm gonna deep dive in as soon as I get home, is now supported by the big three. What do you think of the next frontier is, or what do you think the battle will play out over the next 2, 5, 10 years?
Yeah. I like this saying, sorry, not my saying, that future is already here, it's not evenly distributed yet, right? So there are some standards already that exist, they supported in some browsers that you can already use today. About 10 years ago, I came up with this technology called UX Capture. I don't remember if I shared it at all here in this talk, I don't think I did, but it's a way to measure some more of your user's experience closer to what it is. Like I mentioned the button, remember, measure your button, don't measure LCP, whatever, right? So some of that was referring to that work. But there are some standards that already emerged since that time when we didn't have any more standards, like element timing. Element timing, for example, is a way to mark your element with the attribute. You just HTML element, you say element timing equals and whatever name you give it. And it will record the time when that element was rendered, with caveats. Not all elements, very few elements actually, but it's the caveats are there for reasons, big reasons actually, but it is one of those newer things, right? I don't think element timing is widely supported yet. By widely supported means it's a baseline term. It means all three browsers implemented it, basically. Another new technology currently actually in incubating, I forgot if that's the term. They have the terms in the standardizations bodies where like there's incubating, proposed incubating, whatever, called container timing, actually created by Bloomberg engineering team, because most of their terminal is actually Chromium-based terminal, right? They didn't necessarily think of that as every browser because they needed it for Chromium, but eventually they basically said, well, we need that measurement. And that's, if you think about this element timing, it's basically accumulation of all of that element timings for the container, right? Much better because like in the past, with element timing, you had to instrument every component and then figure out the latest and stuff like that. That's kind of what UX Capture did with user timing as well and other JavaScript APIs. But so container timing is being implemented in Chromium and Firefox by Igalia, which is an independent consultancy that Bloomberg is paying to implement that. I don't remember if they're going to work on WebKit or not, but effectively, like, this is a new standard already in the works. So if you want to be on top of those standards, move the edge or even be in front of the bleeding edge, join standardization bodies too, right? Again, we can talk about standardization separately, but it's challenging. Yeah, you know, I am not a big player. You said I'm on the committee. Yeah, sure, but I'm in a working group, but in the community group. Sorry, but I'm not a big player in there. But it's fascinating to see. It's great to contribute to opinion and the industry and specific vendor experiences and stuff like that. And I think only together we can make it happen, because some of these things, browsers don't just adopt technology if nobody uses it. You need to use it. You know, origin trials is another thing that all browsers, or at least Chromium definitely has, and Microsoft too. I don't remember. We have origin trials where you can sign up for new technologies that are available already in the browser, but under the flag, and you can say my domain wants to use this technology. And like when I was at Etsy, we had we participated in this origin trial about fetch priority attribute for the images, where you could, in particular, like the very quick win, you put the fetch priority high on your LCP image, and you don't need to do any hacks on your page to reorder the image or make this or that to convince the browser that that's the most important image. You just literally tell it, like, this is the most important image, right? And there are many other features that you can do with that, but we participated at Etsy as part of the origin trial, and we actually were able to collect business data with metrics that it made more money, right? That particular one attribute, by the way, amazing technology, like the best technology out there, just one word that does the magic, you know. Again, it took a decade or so to make that happen overall, you know. A new technology is coming out called compression dictionaries for compression. If you think gzip doing magic today, or broadly doing a little bit more magic, compression dictionary do magical square for the compression and transfer over the wire. It's already here. We are not there yet, right? So like, learn what exists today, and then once you master that, shape what exists in the future. That's basically it. It's expensive to do that. So you need to be invested into it, either for personal motivational reasons like I am, or for financial reasons like companies do it. You know, but well, luckily in my case, those interests align and I'm employed to do that. But you know, it's not always the case. For many years, I did that without being employed for it. You know, so for most of you, it's probably the case. You're not a member of performance team, most likely, right? Like you are an engineer on a team, on particular team, right? And so you can contribute to it. You don't need a title of web performance engineer to make faster user experiences.
Thanks, great talk. What were the things about React you thought we should be careful about?
The word that starts with R, React. You know? No, I'm sorry. Like it might have sounded like I hate React, and I do, but it's not because it's a bad technology on itself. I myself recommended React technology as a technology before, right? Not my proudest moment, but at the same time, there are benefits from it. I think the main challenge is not the technology itself, but the way the community is built around it. Okay, I don't know where the line is between the technology itself and how it's promoted, right? But React engineers don't care about the bundle size. They don't care about server-side rendering. Yes, they're forced to do it, and it sucks, and they don't want to do it, right? They don't care about how browser paints it. They don't care why React even exists. Is that because React is better or because it was just promoted so much? Today, there's a chance you don't need a React at all. Like it's not doing what you thought it does. Does it worse than other frameworks that actually do it better? Like if you thought of signals being better than reactive thing in React, right? Like I forgot how they call it in React, but basically, yeah, I'm not an expert on the topic, but like talk to Rich Harris. So watch that presentation. I don't know. Have you attended that one? I thought you did.
I did.
Okay, yeah. So, if you talk to a React engineer, they treat React as a given. Not necessarily because they love it, but because the organization chose to use React, right? They don't look at the page load and say, hey, this component should be clearly rendered on the server side because our designer said this is part of the primary content. It should show up the moment the website loads. So CSS needs to be applied quickly, and then JavaScript needs to enhance the experience. They don't think that way. They think we have a component to build. I don't even know if it's server-side rendered or client-side rendered. I don't think there is much value in it. So that's kind of the thinking that is not conducive with performance. I want to say that the new owner of React, Vercel, I don't know if you're familiar, but Vercel took over React from Facebook. Yes, you might think there was an announcement. No, there was no announcement. They just contributed to React. They are biggest contributor to React, right? Again, there's no owner of open source projects, folks. Like that's not how it works. But in de facto, they are the new owner, right? You know, they are introducing new performance technologies that they promote as faster, like Next.js specifically, and their I might be butchering the names, but not incremental rendering, but streaming, streamed rendering, or something like that, basically, and a few other technologies, and many other technologies that Vercel sells on the paper promote performance. But in reality, they just, in my opinion, by the way, I think they're just selling Vercel. I don't think they are as invested into actual experience because they will have to basically say, oh, we fucked up, React sucks, right? Again, this is very opinionated perspective here, but I think the way I've seen, I already mentioned, React bundle size is like kind of a problem for engineers, but you know, it's like a little bit, and they kind of end the conversation there, right? I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is bigger, and but they're powerless in moving how can I tell my recruiter that React is not the technology the company should be using when I'm interviewing for it, right? The same goes for with VP of engineering and everybody else, right? Like, yeah, I think that's about as much as I can say here. Like, be aware of big choice that's supposedly better, but maybe not. JSX is not React. Component-based architectures are not React. Reactive, and maybe the word reactive means React, but like interfaces that react to data and are responsive and can change quickly and be smooth to use are not React. A lot of people equated the two terms, but that's not the case, and that's actually have never been completely the case either, and that's unfortunate. So, by the way, this applies to every framework. Just saying, the framework is abstracting away something from you, and no matter how they sell it to you, it's abstracted away. And all abstractions are leaky. They never tell you complete truth. And sometimes it's the right choice. I mean, yeah, like, I have $1, I have only $1 to spend. I cannot spend $100 required for all the research. I have to choose what's an easy choice. And that's okay, But maybe when you tell your Claude to build a website, specify not to use React and not to use Tailwind, because that's a default that it was trained on. And by the way, that applies to most of the AI today, for whatever ridiculous reason that is. But specify which framework to use. And you will be surprised how well it can build web components and native HTML and CSS and JavaScript and applications that load faster if you tell it to.
And how do you save them?
They can do everything. Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't watch your stream. Please tell me where it is.
Okay, yes, twitch.tv/Sergey Chernyshev. Yeah. But I don't stream that much. And I usually don't do performance streams. I just build it with AI. Yeah. I mean, if it's any better, I'm building a graphics editor right now without React. Without React. I didn't put a lot of effort into it. I mean, my main goal is to build a graphics editor, not to build React.
In the vein of meeting people where they are and also stripping away the unnecessary frameworks, what should designers know about cascading style sheets and hypertext markup language?
Okay, that's a very good question. Before I left Russia, I was the CTO of a small design agency, what we call here the web design agency. And my partner in business was a designer. I worked with designers all my life. And I feel like I want to say that designers should know nothing about the medium that they're designing in, because they should know about user experience they're building rather than the tools they're using. However, right? Great design comes with no regard for technology, because Google built their own browser. Come on, technology is possible if you want to. We flew to the moon, right? The question is, do you have the budget? But I feel like designers should be aware of accomplishable mediums. If you are a designer whose minute costs $1 million and people will follow your word, sure, you don't have to know the technology. You could say, hey, like all of those Apple promotion videos are like, oh, we built this little thing that is amazing, and you move smoothly and stuff like that. They don't mean a word of technology, by the way, almost, right? Like talk about experience mostly. But in reality, designers are solving the business problem of this week, right? They have very short, they don't have as much agency as we want them to have, right? So they need to know how Medium works. And if they came to build design websites, they need to know how websites are formulated and what are the options of the design. In fact, do they need to know that the new CSS standard replaced old JavaScript solution? Maybe not, right? But if developers who need to talk to designers, right, told them, hey, look, apparently full page navigation, view transitions are now available, so we can make what you all did in the native apps and require us to write a freaking another language for every operating system now can be done on the web with zero JavaScript and no JavaScript frameworks and works that looks like this, and you show them the demo, they're like, oh my God. And you say, oh, and just saying it will load 2 seconds faster, which means it will bring 2.5 seconds to half a second. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but if you give them that perspective, you've shown that video that is empty, or big difference, or whatever, like, sorry, wrong intonation on that second one. You see what I mean? So I think you need to befriend them. You need to tell them even more, like, hey, You don't need to understand this technological bullshit. Just tell them, design the experience, I'll build it. You know? I think you will be better off because they will finally think about it, and you will not be thinking like you will not come to your manager and say, well, you know, I need to now build it and I don't know what to build, but I'll spend time. You'll say, well, design told us to build it fast. I'm not doing it in my spare time. I'm actually implementing the requirements, right? Yeah. Very hot topic, as you can imagine. Being renamed from engineer to designer is not easy. Okay, I think we are way over time, and we are done with the talk. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Now I'll take off my speaker hat.